Hey friends, tonight we're diving into something ancient, chaotic, and oddly relatable. Life as an ordinary person in the glory days of ancient Rome. Not a senator, not a general, just you. A plebeian with a sore back and a questionable piece of bread. If you've ever wondered what it felt like to live under marble statues but with no plumbing, this one's for you. So before you get too comfortable, do me a favour. Like the video. Subscribe if you want more content like this, but only if you genuinely enjoy this video. Drop a comment to let me know what time it is for you and where you're watching from. I love seeing who's out there listening around the world in this community. Dim the lights, get cozy, close your eyes, and let's travel back to a city of gods, gossip, garum, and grind. This is ancient Rome, as lived by the people no statue ever honoured. You wake up to the sound of someone vomiting. Again, not dramatically, not the kind of vomiting that might imply illness or concern. Just a quiet, resigned heave, the sort that tells you it's either wine from last night or the fish sauce that should have stayed buried in the amphora. Your room, or what generous tongues might call a cellar, smells like damp straw, warm bread, and despair. There's no window, unless you count the hole in the wall that lets in sunlight for about 12 minutes at noon and rat noise the rest of the time. You sleep on a shared straw mat thin enough to feel the stone beneath and just thick enough to keep your skin off it. There are 4 of you in this space. 5 if you count Tiberius, who sleeps sitting up in the corner and hasn't paid rent in 3 months. Technically, neither of you. Technically, nobody has. The air is warm, not the nice kind. Roman warm. The kind of warm that smells like old sweat, hot oil and wet limestone. You stretch your legs, dislodging a cockroach the size of a sestertius. It doesn't even run. Just gives you a tired look like, don't start, we're all trying to survive. This is Rome, capital of the world, home to marble temples, grand forums, gladiator battles, and people who relieve themselves in pots that get emptied out the window. Your building is called an insula. That's Latin for fire hazard. It's 5 stories high, made of wood, stone, and hope. You live on the 3rd floor, just high enough to avoid the worst of the smells from the street, but low enough that if the building collapses, which it will eventually, you'll die quickly. The walls are cracked, the plaster flakes like dandruff, and the neighbours are always shouting, not arguing, just shouting, because it turns out that once you hit a certain level of density in a city, nobody speaks. They perform acoustically aggressive monologues. There's no bathroom. That's what the alley's for. There's no kitchen. That's what the street vendors are for. There's no privacy. That's what fantasy is for. Still, there's something almost charming about it. You're insular. You know which floorboards creak, which steps skip, and which parts of the wall are structurally optional. When the wind blows through the cracks just right, it makes a little whistling tune. You like to pretend it's the muses. It's probably just rats. You get dressed, though that's a generous word. You wear a tunic, hand-me-down and hand-patched, the colour of old porridge. It used to be white. Probably. It now bears stains from wine, olive oil, and possibly blood. Though you choose not to think too hard about that one. The fabric's coarse and smells faintly of mildew, but it's yours. You tie it at the waist with a bit of rope, because belts are for senators and people who own furniture. Your sandals are made from scrap leather and hope. The right one has a flap that flaps when you walk, and the left one squeaks. You call them your quiet and loud shoes. Breakfast is the crust of bread you hid under your mat last night. You bite it, and it bites back. It's hard enough to be used as currency in Gaul. Still, it's food. You chew slowly and sip from a cup of watered wine. Not because you're trying to be fancy, it's just safer than the water. The aqueducts are magnificent. The lead pipes are, well, lead pipes. Outside, Rome groans awake. The street below is alive if you define alive loosely. Smoke drifts from cooking fires, mixing with the scent of garlic, sweat and fish sauce that's been aging in the sun since Julius Caesar had hair. Vendors are already shouting. Fresh garum, aged like your mother's teeth. Bread. Not burnt today, mostly. Hot lentils. Probably not rat. You step into the street and nearly get flattened by a mule cart loaded with amphorae. The driver yells something rude and the mule gives you a look of long-suffering wisdom. You nod. You too have carried heavy loads and been yelled at unfairly. Rome is a miracle of engineering and a catastrophe of planning. The roads are paved, sort of, and choked with traffic. Carts, slaves, merchants, goats, senators in litters, street performers pretending to be statues, and statues pretending to be relevant. The gutters run with water, or something resembling it, and sometimes with more solid offerings from chamber pots above. You keep to the side, eyes up. You've learned the hard way that looking up is better than looking ahead. A falling object in Rome is more likely to kill you than a speeding chariot. You pass a public fountain. It's beautiful, carved in marble with a grinning nymph and a lion's head. It smells like old wine and regret. A man is washing his feet in it. Another man is drinking from it. They make eye contact, nod, and go back to their business. The Forum is nearby, but that's not where you're going. That's for the elite. You? You're headed to the market, the real one. The Subura's back alleys are where life actually happens. This is where the fishmonger yells, where the baker's boy flirts with every girl under 30 and every man over 60, and where thieves move like poetry through a crowd. You watch as a child lifts a purse from a fat merchant, palms it, and vanishes into a crowd like smoke. The merchant continues arguing over the price of dates, unaware he's just bought his own purse back. You nod approvingly. That kid's going places, probably prison. But then again, Rome's prisons are mostly for debtors and poor people with bad timing. Everyone else pays their way out. You smell something delicious, something rich, meaty, spicy. Your stomach clenches. It's a stew, meat, onions, lentils, herbs. It's probably horse, or goat, or rat. Possibly all three. Doesn't matter. Smells like heaven after a month of barley and cabbage. The vendor sees you hesitate and calls out, "Special price today, only one as, or I trade for something shiny." You pat your tunic. You have a single copper coin, and it's already promised, to bread. You sigh and move on. The vendor shrugs and calls to the next passerby. "You don't know what you missed. This rat was a general in the last war." You pause by a small shrine tucked between two buildings. It's dedicated to Mercury, the god of thieves, merchants, travellers, and anyone with a flexible relationship to the truth. Someone's left an offering of wine, someone else a small clay tablet etched with thanks. You whisper a quiet hope for a better job, or at least for the mule dung to miss you today. A priest passes by, eyes you, and mutters a blessing, or possibly a curse. You've learned not to ask. Rome, in this moment, is a paradox. It is loud and divine, filthy and majestic, broken and immortal. It's a city of marble facades hiding rotting interiors, of heroic statues towering over pickpockets, of public baths that smell like a colosseum after a lion show. But it's home, and under the new Emperor Augustus, who used to be Octavian, who used to be that nervous kid who cried a lot after Caesar died, Rome is changing. Not fast, and not for people like you, but you feel it. The old republic is gone. The Senate still exists, technically, like your sandals. Still there, but mostly for show. What comes next? You don't know, but you suspect it still involves standing in line for stale bread, dodging excrement from above, and wondering if your roommate's cough is just allergies, or the start of something classical. And so, your day begins. Welcome to Rome, where the streets run with ambition, wine, and whatever that smell is. You don't have a career. You have whatever pays today. In this glorious new Roman Empire, freshly minted under Augustus, there are temples of marble, armies of iron, and citizens of crumbling spine. You, however, are not a citizen. Or maybe you are, technically, but not in the way that gets you toga privileges or the right to sue someone who punches you in the throat. You're a plebeian, a working stiff, a cog in the imperial wheel greased with olive oil and blood. You don't get to choose a profession. You get to hope you're not chosen for one that kills you outright. Today, you're looking for work near the Forum Holitorium, the vegetable market. It's a loud, chaotic mess of carts, shouting vendors, and the smell of spoiled turnips trying to stage a comeback. A foreman stands on a crate, barking names and jobs. Men crowd around, waving their arms, offering favours, bribes, or just the hope that being loud counts as a resume. You shove your way in, elbowing a man who smells like pickled onions and failure. The foreman glances at you. You got a strong back. You nod, you lie. He hands you a rope and points to a stack of amphorae. Warehouse, down the street. Don't drop anything, especially not the wine. You're now a porter, temporarily. For the next 6 hours, you will carry oversized ceramic jars filled with red liquid that cost more than your rent. You do not get to drink it. You do not get to sneeze near it. You just carry it, sweat on it, and pray none of them slip. The warehouse is dark, damp, and smells like wet gods. The floor is uneven, your sandals are not, and each amphora is a personal insult to your spinal column. A supervisor watches you from a shady corner. He's not there to help. He's there to ensure you do not develop illusions about water breaks or dignity. By midday, your arms feel like boiled rope. Your back is a letter of resignation written in knots. Your shirt clings to your body like it's afraid of falling into the filth. You're paid half an A's, which is roughly enough to buy a cup of wine or a mild insult from a vendor. You take your earnings to the tavern, not one of those nice ones where senators drink imported Greek wine and discuss the finer points of conquering other people's culture. No, this tavern is called the Spilled Amphora, and the name is optimistic. Nothing here has ever been full enough to spill. Inside, it's dim and warm. The kind of warm that smells like fermented sweat and kitchen smoke. A man plays a flute badly in the corner, while someone else shouts about dice. You order the house red, which is actually the house brown, and sit next to a man with one eye and a laugh like a collapsing wall. He asks what you do, you say porter. He nods with the understanding of someone who's also carried heavy things and trauma. He says he used to be a fishmonger until the Fishmongers Guild priced him out. Now he sells opinions and occasionally his shoes. The conversation turns to politics, because of course it does. Augustus, someone says, that kid's got Caesar's smile, but none of the stabbings. He's smarter, says another, knows how to bribe a crowd and flatter the Senate. You nod, not because you agree, but because nodding is cheaper than speaking. In theory, Augustus has brought peace. In practice, you're still hauling wine jugs for crusts of bread and dodging chamber pot contents from the second floor. But at least the soldiers aren't marching through the streets killing each other anymore. Progress. You stumble home at dusk. Your body aches, your coin pouch is lighter than your tunic, and you're pretty sure you've pulled a muscle that doesn't exist in medical scrolls yet. The Insula is quieter now. Not quiet, just less loud. Someone's cooking lentils 3 floors up. You can smell them. You hate them. You also want them. Tiberius is still in the corner. He asks if you brought food. You lie and say you ate it all. He lies and says he's been saving a piece of bread for you. You both smile, and neither of you believes the other. It's a kind of love. You lie on your mat staring at the ceiling, wondering if today was a good day or just a survivable one. There's a difference. Rome has taught you that. You listen to the city wind down. Muffled shouts, clanging pots. A couple arguing in the next room about whose turn it is to clean the bucket. Tomorrow you might carry bricks, or firewood, or get lucky and find someone willing to pay for stories. Not likely, but not impossible. Rome never sleeps. But it does settle a little. You close your eyes and try not to think about the noise, the ache, or the fact that the guy 2 floors up always seems to throw his bathwater out the window 5 minutes after you fall asleep. You drift off, not to dreams, but to the sound of a city that never stops needing, shouting, and somehow surviving. You smell like sweat, wine, and disappointment, which means it's time to visit the Thermae. Roman public baths are one of the few places where almost everyone, rich, poor, slave, freedman, ends up with the same goal. Scrape the day off your skin and pretend you're not covered in societal neglect. Not all baths are equal, of course. The elite soak in marble pools attended by slaves who scrub them like prize racehorses. You go to Thermae Subura Maxima, which is a very fancy name for a building that looks like a partially collapsed bakery with steam pouring out of the roof. You arrive with the only things you need: a strigil, a rag, and a sense of resignation. The strigil is your most trusted tool, a curved metal scraper used to remove oil, sweat, grime, and your last sliver of dignity. You paid 1 as to get in, which stung, but was cheaper than disease and less painful than being downwind of yourself for another hour. The attendant eyes you and gestures toward the apoditerium, the changing room, which is essentially a warm cave filled with half-dressed strangers and the unmistakable scent of wet feet. You disrobe, which takes seconds, since you're only wearing a tunic and sandals. You fold your clothes and tuck them in a corner, which is your way of saying goodbye, because you know someone's going to steal them. Theft is part of the tradition here. So is pretending it isn't. First stop, the tepidarium. A warm room designed to lull you into false comfort. The air is thick, moist. Your skin starts sweating in places you forgot you had. It smells like olive oil, heated limestone, and old men arguing about wheat prices. You sit on a stone bench slick with the ghosts of previous bathers. Across from you, a man is trying to teach his son how to count using cracks in the ceiling. Next to you, a woman scrapes her leg with such force you're not sure if it's exfoliation or vengeance. Someone farts quietly. The steam absorbs the offence like a sponge of shame. Then, the caldarium, hot, steamy, and designed to test the limits of human patience. The moment you enter, it hits you, like walking into a bowl of soup that resents your presence. The temperature is offensive. The air stings your nostrils. The walls sweat more than the people. The pool at the centre is less a bath and more a test of how long flesh can stay attached to bone. You step in slowly, your legs questioning your life choices. The water is cloudy, warm, and contains ingredients better left unlisted. You settle in, neck deep, next to a man who smells like garlic and economic pessimism. Conversations float in the mist. Did you hear? Agrippa's building another aqueduct. Show off. My cousin joined the legions. They gave him shoes and a spear. He cried. Bread prices are up again. I told you we should have robbed that bakery. You nod. You contribute nothing. This is sacred space, where gossip, heat, and collective regret are stirred into a human stew. A servant offers you oil. You accept because saying no would be suspicious. He pours it over your skin. You rub it in, then scrape it off with your strigil, dragging away dirt, oil, and shame. It feels better, in the way that surviving feels better than not. Someone drops their strigil. It clangs. A communal oof echoes. Every man in the room instinctively checks their toes. Next, the frigidarium, cold water, the Roman version of a reality check. You walk in slowly, muscles still simmering from the caldarium. The plunge pool awaits. It's clear, crisp, and cold enough to make you question whether you ever wanted to be clean in the first place. You descend, inch by inch, until the water grabs your soul and squeezes. Every plebeian in the room makes the same face, the universal "I regret everything" expression. And then, peace. It's here, in this icy little pool, that the Empire almost makes sense. You float for a moment. The steam rises above your head. The sounds soften, chatter, dripping water, soft echoes of laughter and sloshing. For a second, you're neither poor nor tired, just clean and oddly optimistic. The man next to you sneezes. You remember why optimism is dangerous. You dry off with your rag, now slightly damp and significantly grosser. Your clothes are miraculously still there. possibly because someone thought they were a rag someone else was drying with. You dress slightly lighter, slightly fresher, slightly less encased in crust. You step out of the bathhouse into the Rome dusk, warm, golden, and smelling faintly of baked clay and donkey sweat. You feel new, not entirely clean. That's a myth. But clean enough to pretend your back doesn't hurt and your job prospects aren't one emperor away from collapse. This is what the Romans got right. Baths weren't just about hygiene. They were about community, status, scheming, escaping, and for a moment, they made you feel like the Empire included you, even if the Empire didn't know your name. Today's your day off, which means you'll spend it watching people get violently unalive while eating bread shaped like fish. This is Rome's version of leisure. The sun rises over the city with all the subtlety of a trumpet blast. The streets are already filling, not with carts or fishmongers, but with anticipation. The games are today: gladiators, animal hunts, possibly a public execution with a comedic warm-up act. You stretch, you crack your neck, you try not to think about the dream you had where your insula collapsed into a vat of boiling garum. You head to the arena early, which is to say, you leave before the breadlines disappear. There's a policy under Augustus: panem et circens, bread and circuses. Keep the people fed and entertained, and maybe they won't riot about the wealth gap or the fact that the Senate's just a toga-wearing drama club now. You get your ration, a stale loaf wrapped in state-sponsored apathy. Then it's onto the Colosseum, or technically the Amphitheatrum Flavium, but nobody says that unless they're trying to sound educated and lonely. You don't have a seat, you have a space. Up in the cheap section, shaded by a tattered awning and occupied by people who smell like every type of meat you can't afford. The games begin with a parade. Of course they do. Gladiators march in, muscles glistening with oil and a hint of mortality. Some nod, some sneer, some look like they're trying to remember if they turn the stove off. There are cheers, jeers, and one guy who yells, "I love you," at every passing gladiator, regardless of gender. He is universally respected. Then come the animals. Exotic beasts dragged in from every corner of the empire. Lions from Africa, bears from Gaul, and at least one very angry ostrich that refuses to participate in the script. They roar, snarl, poop, and look majestic. And then it becomes less National Geographic and more nature documentary directed by a psychopath. Hunters, sometimes criminals, sometimes trained, are sent in to fight them, which is generous. It's mostly running, screaming, and occasionally tripping into history. You eat your bread, you sip watered wine. You wonder what kind of job lets you throw a net at a tiger and still claim you're employed. Next, gladiators, the main event. 2 men enter. One of them's wearing armour that looks like it was designed by a drunk sculptor. The other has a net and a trident and the expression of someone who made poor life choices in their teens. They square off. The crowd roars. You join in. You don't know who you're rooting for, but you're very invested in their survival, or at least their dramatic defeat. The fight is brutal, graceful, bloody. Every clang of steel echoes in your chest. Every groan from the wounded pulls something primal out of you. It's horrifying. It's exhilarating. It's deeply, deeply Roman. Sometimes the crowd votes on whether the loser dies. Sometimes they just yell until someone important notices. A thumb is raised or lowered. It's not entirely clear. Modern historians argue about it. You just copy the guy next to you, who seems like he yells at a lot of thumbs. The loser is spared. The crowd erupts, not because they're merciful, because they like a good sequel. Between matches there's entertainment, comedians, jugglers, possibly a man fighting a goose. A bard sings a heroic ballad about the glory of Rome. He rhymes Caesar with Easer. You try not to judge. He has one eye and a harp made of tortoise shell. Vendors walk the aisles selling roasted chickpeas, spicy sausages, and something called honey water that tastes like regret. You buy it anyway. It's cold. The day ends with a mock naval battle. Because of course it does. The arena floods, boats are wheeled in. Prisoners dressed as pirates flail around, while soldiers pretend to be Poseidon's wrath. You cheer for the ones who can swim. At one point a boat capsizes. Everyone cheers louder. Rome does not value safety. It values spectacle. As the sun sets, you trudge home. Your throat is sore from shouting. Your stomach is full of questionable meat. Your sandals are sticky with something that might be honey or might be bird. You feel good, dirty, sunburnt, morally conflicted, but good. This is what Rome does. It distracts. It dazzles. It gives the poor a front row seat to carnage and calls it equality. And for a moment, it works. For a few hours, you didn't worry about your rent, or the fact that your job pays less than a loaf of bread, or that your insula leans a little more every week. For a few hours, you were just part of the roar. Just another Roman watching the empire burn slowly while clapping along. Rome believes in gods like you believe in buckets. There's always another one somewhere nearby, and most of them leak. There are gods for war, for love, for sewer maintenance. There are gods for doors, Janus, gods for thresholds, and possibly a god for the guy who walks into the door and spills his wine. The empire is a divine traffic jam. Officially, you're supposed to revere Jupiter, Juno, Mars, Minerva, the classics. But in practice, your household altar is less pantheon and more supernatural suggestion box. Each morning begins with a ritual, not a grand toga-clad temple thing. Just a quiet nod to the Lares and Penates, household spirits who watch over your home such as it is. You light a bit of incense. Not the fancy kind. This is street incense. It smells like burnt figs and hope. You mutter a few words under your breath. Not a prayer, really. More like a whispery bribe. Keep the roof from falling. Keep the rats out of the bread. Keep Tiberius from snoring. You pour a drop of wine into a chipped cup at the shrine. The gods of your home, like you, live modestly. Public festivals are less modest. There's one almost every week, it seems. Lupercalia, Saturnalia, Lemuria, the feast of this, the purification of that, the day we honour that one time Mars tripped and invented duelling. Today it's Mercatus, a market festival, which means the forum is draped in ribbons, there's a sacrificial bull snorting at the crowd, and someone's already drunk enough to think dancing near a priest is a good idea. The Flamines, priests in ridiculous hats, chant sacred hymns with all the enthusiasm of unpaid interns. The augur reads the entrails of a goat and declares that Rome shall prosper if people stop asking questions. Everyone cheers. You cheer too. Because Rome isn't about belief, it's about participation. You clap, you nod, and you hope that Jupiter appreciates effort more than accuracy. Temples are everywhere. Some are grand. Some are suspiciously goat-shaped. You pass the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. It's enormous, covered in gold leaf and ore. You don't go inside. It's not for people like you. It's for senators, generals, and important men who talk about virtue while wearing rings worth more than your building. You instead stop by a tiny shrine under an archway. It's dedicated to Cloacina, goddess of the sewer. You drop a coin. She's the only one who seems to get things done. Sometimes religion is about fear. Other times it's about trying to get your cousin's rash to go away. You visit a haruspex, a fortune teller who specialises in examining entrails. You pay 2 asses and point to your cousin's rash. She examines a dead chicken and says, "You have offended the god of skin." You ask how to fix that. Leave an offering at a crossroads, burn rosemary, and don't eat lentils on even-numbered days. You agree. You would have agreed to lighting your sandals on fire if she'd said it with enough confidence. Nighttime is when the ghosts come out. Or so people say. You whisper protection charms. You hang a charm over your door, a little phallus on a string, which is both hilariously common and apparently spiritually effective. Rome is a city built on bones. Literally. Beneath your feet lie centuries of bodies. Gladiators, victims, emperors, barbers, and at least one guy who probably owed someone money. You walk faster after dark. Sometimes the gods feel close. Most of the time they feel like landlords, unseen, omnipotent, and weirdly obsessed with ceremonial detail, but you keep honouring them. Because bad luck comes quickly, and good luck comes rarely. You can't afford to offend Jupiter, or Neptune, or whatever god handles sawbacks and bad wine. You don't pray because you're pious. You pray because you live in a city with faulty stairs, wild animals, unpredictable weather, and very enthusiastic thieves. So you light the incense, you whisper the charm, you pour the wine, and then you hope. Not for miracles, just for a quiet night, a solid roof, and maybe a festival where nobody gets trampled. Rome is a city of empires, temples, and men in armour. But your home is 2 rooms and a dream of fewer roommates. You live in an insula, an apartment building that somehow manages to feel both too big and too small at the same time. You share it with your cousin, your cousin's wife, their 2 children, an elderly aunt who claims to have met Cicero, she didn't, and Tiberius, who might be a relative or just very persistent. The walls are thin, the floor creaks like it's gossiping, the ceiling leaks, not just water, sometimes other things. Things you refuse to name. You don't raise children in Rome. You keep them alive and hope they raise themselves. Your cousin's youngest has been chewing on a piece of amphora for an hour. No one stops him. It keeps him quiet. The eldest is already working part-time, carrying messages for a scribe who pays in figs and vague promises. Education? Sure, if you count learning how not to get trampled by a chariot as education. Actual schooling exists, but it's expensive and mostly for boys who can read without moving their lips. You teach them the important things. Never stand under windows. Always check your bread for weevils. If a senator smiles at you, run. Marriage, in Rome, is a legal arrangement with romantic side effects. Maybe. Most marriages are contracts between families. Love may follow, or it may not. You know couples who seem happy. You also know couples who speak only through sarcastic eye rolls and passive-aggressive loaves of undercooked bread. Your cousin's marriage is stable if you define stability as loud, frequent disagreements followed by suspiciously quiet stew-eating. Divorce is common. Surprisingly easy, even. A few words, a return of the dowry, and it's done. No court, no forms, just social awkwardness and a lot of whispering from the neighbours. Romance still happens, but it's rarely poetic, it's more... We both live in the same tenement and the bakery line is long, so let's talk. Maybe you've had someone, or want someone, or had someone who now owes you 3 sestertii and a very long explanation. You once courted a weaver. She smelled like flax and sarcasm. You brought her a sweet cake. She said it looked like it had been stepped on by a gladiator. You liked her honesty. She liked your eyebrows. It almost worked. Then she married a fuller. He offered a dowry. You offered a nervous laugh. Life in Rome isn't built for romance, but that doesn't stop anyone. It just makes the stories better. There's no privacy. There's shared space, shared blankets, shared meals, shared opinions about which neighbour is the worst. You sleep next to your cousin. You snore. He pretends not to notice. You both pretend not to notice your aunt's nightly monologue about the good old republic. Someone always knocks over the chamber pot. No one admits it. Arguments are loud. Apologies are louder. Affection is subtle. Half a crust left on your mat. A patch sewn in your tunic. A shared eye roll when the landlord demands rent in advance. Family in Rome isn't always who you're born with. Sometimes it's who hasn't left. You don't get space. You get survival. And inside that, somehow, laughter, support, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone else is awake, worrying about the same things. Your aunt may be insufferable, but she knows how to wrap a wound. Your cousin may borrow money he never returns, but he'll fight anyone who insults you in the street, even if it's a goat. This is Rome. Crowded, loud, cramped. But it's yours. Night in Rome isn't peaceful. It's just louder in different places. The sun sets behind the 7 hills, casting long shadows through narrow alleyways and collapsing roof lines. The sky turns a dusty purple. The streets cool just enough to make the smell of fish, urine, and last week's stew rise like steam ghosts. You've survived another day, which is in Rome a kind of personal triumph. Now comes the next challenge, not dying before morning. Your insula groans as the heat leaks from its bones. You light an oil lamp, just a little dish of terracotta with a stubby wick and olive oil that smells faintly of yesterday's lunch. It flickers bravely against the darkness, casting long, shaky shadows of your furniture. One stool, a crate, and Tiberius. Tiberius sleeps sitting up, snoring softly, as if narrating his own dreams. You pull your blanket over your shoulders. It's thin and smells like wool and mildew. You'd wash it, but then you'd be sleeping under wet wool and mildew. Outside, the street changes character. By day, merchants, fishmongers, children, shouts. By night, whispers, soft footsteps, the occasional shriek followed by silence. The watchmen patrol, armed with sticks, torches, and barely enough salary to care. Their job is to keep order. Mostly they keep walking. If you're screaming, they'll arrive eventually, assuming they weren't bribed to ignore your scream. You've learned not to trust shadows, not because they lie, but because they often have knives. The taverns stay open. Of course they do. You hear laughter from 2 floors down. Drunken joy, the best kind. Followed by a crash, some shouting, then the sound of someone falling over a barrel, or possibly a body. Either way, the laughter resumes. A woman sings off-key. A man accompanies her with what might be a drum or might just be an upturned pot. You smile. This is normal. Rome doesn't sleep. It smoulders. You look out the window, technically. It's a hole in the wall with a cloth nailed over it. Through the gaps you see torchlight drifting like fireflies. Someone is herding a goat. Someone else is arguing with the goat. A stray cat watches them both like a disapproving magistrate. A group of young men passes by, laughing too loudly. One kicks a broken urn. It shatters. No one reacts. That's Rome. Nothing is new. Everything is loud. You try to sleep. Your body says yes. Your surroundings say no. The floor creaks. The wind whistles through cracks in the walls. Someone yells about a stolen sandal. Again. There's a rat in the corner. You've named him Rufus. He ignores you. You respect that. You shift on the straw mat. You're never fully comfortable. The floor presses against you like a question you're too tired to answer. You dream lightly. Rome doesn't allow deep sleep unless you're rich or unconscious. You think of tomorrow, of waking up, of hauling bricks or wine or crates full of olives that never quite smell right. You think of bread, always bread, and you think of the emperor, the one with marble statues and golden wreaths and an army of poets writing about how divine he is. You wonder if he ever hears what the city sounds like at 2 a.m, when the only thing keeping you safe is a locked door and the hope that ghosts respect boundaries. And still, you sleep. Because you have to. Because in Rome, rest is rebellion. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. Wake, scrape, beg, carry, cheer, curse, hope, and survive. But for now, in the soft glow of dying lamplight, with your family snoring like a herd of drunken sheep, and Rufus scratching out his memoirs in the corner, you rest, and Rome watches. Rome is a city of laws, but the law is more of a suggestion than a guarantee, especially if you're poor, unlucky, or both. By the time you're 10, you already understand how the city works. If you're robbed, you complain loudly. If you're rich and robbed, the praetor sends a squad. If you're poor and robbed, the baker shrugs and gives you half a loaf out of pity. That's justice. Today, you wake to shouting. Not the usual, "Who took my amphora?" shouting, angry mob shouting. There's been a theft, a real one, a necklace stolen from a senator's wife, which means everything just got serious. The street is full of whisperers, fingers point, names are muttered, a local boy is dragged out of a tenement by his hair. His only crime, living near the scene. No one knows if he did it. No one cares. A scapegoat is more efficient than an investigation. You look away. You don't want to watch what happens next. Because you know, in Rome, guilt is often just bad timing in a crowd. Crime isn't rare in Rome. Crime is woven into the bricks. Pickpockets, cut purses, confidence men. One guy runs a scam where he accidentally drops a fake coin and then robs the person who picks it up. People still fall for it. Even you've bent the rules. Everyone does. You once sold a crate of olives that had gone slightly rancid. You called them fermented. The customer didn't notice. Or maybe they did, but they were too tired to fight you over olives. Theft is a career path. Extortion is an art. Bribery is a language. And speaking of language, money talks. Loudly. Louder than the law. You've seen it happen. A merchant caught selling watered wine pays the lictors a small bribe and gets a warning. A baker shorting the grain weight donates to a temple and gets forgiven by the gods and the grain inspector. But your neighbour stole a fish once and got whipped in the forum. Why? He couldn't pay. Justice in Rome wears a blindfold. But mostly to ignore the poor. Courts exist. Trials happen. Lawyers shout in Latin that's 30% words and 70% hand gestures. If you're lucky, you get a fair hearing. If you're really lucky, you're not on trial at all. You once watched a trial from the back of the crowd. A man accused of arson, swore he was innocent, swore he was at a bathhouse, had witnesses, had tears, still lost. Turns out the building he burned belonged to a cousin of the judge. Punishments vary, wildly, hilariously, horribly. For theft, whipping, fines, or forced labour. For murder, execution, unless the victim was unpopular. For gossiping about a senator's bald spot, probably exile. No one risks political hairline slander. Execution methods range from quick and awful to public and slightly theatrical. Crucifixion is common for slaves, beheading for citizens. If you're really special, maybe the arena. People love a redemption arc where the criminal dies tragically at the paws of a lion. But not all crime is punished. Some is profitable. You know a man named Faustus. Sells fake coins. Bad ones. Obvious ones. Somehow still in business. Why? Because his cousin is in the city watch, and his mother leaves pies at the Temple of Mercury every week. He once said to you, "There's no such thing as a clean coin in Rome, just clean hands holding it." You're not sure if that's wise or just greasy. You walk home cautiously, not because you're guilty, but because everyone looks guilty in Rome after dark. A shadow behind you, probably a thief. A friendly voice calling your name, probably a setup. A man offering you a deal with no strings, definitely strings. Possibly tied to your feet, upside down. You keep your head down. You keep moving. You avoid the forum. You avoid alleyways. You avoid eye contact with statues just in case. Because in this city, justice is a performance, and the audience is restless, so you survive by staying small, by not asking too many questions, by knowing when to walk, when to run, and when to smile like you agree with the senator you secretly think smells like cabbage. Rome is built on myths about men, but it's held together by women who don't have time for myths. You live with several of them. Your cousin's wife, for example, who runs the household with the precision of a military quartermaster and the patience of a goddess who's had one too many bad prayers. She cooks, cleans, manages the budget, patches your tunic, mothers 2 children, negotiates with vendors, and somehow still finds time to remind you that you left your shoes in the chamber pot. Again. Officially, she has no power. Unofficially, she controls every waking second of your shared life. Roman law says women can't vote, can't hold public office, and technically need a male guardian to manage property. But Roman reality says if you want anything done, ask a woman, then get out of her way. Women work, always. Poor women don't have the luxury of leisure. They're vendors, weavers, launderers, midwives, cooks, servants, and, if all else fails, sex workers, either by necessity or coercion. Your neighbour, Julia, runs a tiny stall selling flatbread. She works 14 hours a day, swears like a sailor, and once chased a thief 3 blocks with a rolling pin. He gave the bread back. Another Marcia sews for 3 different households. Her fingers are raw, her eyesight's fading, but her work keeps 3 families dressed, and 1 lazy husband pretending to look busy. Marriage is a full-time job, but without pay, weekends, or job security. A plebeian wife is expected to manage the home, bear children, stretch a single denarius into 7 meals, and somehow not complain when her husband spends his drinking money on questionable olives. And yet, somehow, they do more than endure. They shape entire households out of chaos and crusts of bread. There are friendships too. Quiet alliances between women who share laundry basins, gossip in the forum, and advice on which temple priest won't judge your questions. You once overheard a conversation between your cousin's wife and the widow upstairs. "How's your new tenant?" "Polite, but too quiet. Might be a spy." "Better than my last one. He played the lyre at night, badly." "The gods punish, but women endure." "Same thing," they laughed, then traded stew ingredients and survival tips. Children are raised by everyone. If they're not yours, they're someone's. If they're crying, someone's fixing it. Women are the doctors, nurses, tutors, and disciplinarians of Rome's next generation. They carry the emotional weight of a city that rarely says thank you. Your cousin's wife once sewed a doll out of scrap cloth for her daughter. The child squealed with joy. 5 minutes later, the doll was used in a reenactment of the Battle of Actium involving a bucket and 2 sticks. The mother sighed and went back to patching sandals. That's Rome. And yet, even in the crush of poverty and duty, there's room for moments. Laughter over shared bread. A quiet song sung while hanging laundry. A story passed from mother to child about gods and heroes, and how to avoid being stepped on by a magistrate's litter. There's a strength here. It doesn't come with armour or laurel wreaths. It comes with blistered hands, sharp wit, and the kind of patience that only people without options ever learn. You once asked your cousin's wife what she wanted if she could have anything. She said, "A clean floor, a husband who doesn't snore, and a bath without someone knocking on the door every 5 seconds." You nodded. She nodded. Then she handed you a broom and said, "Start with the floor." In Rome, the gods get temples, the emperors get statues, but women get things done. Not always with recognition, rarely with thanks, but with unshakable purpose and the quiet knowledge that if they stop for even one moment, everything else falls apart. They are the silent scaffolding holding up your crumbling life, and they do it without needing a bust in the forum. You didn't vote for it. You didn't ask for it. You probably didn't even understand it. But one day, the Republic was gone. Nobody held a funeral. There was no ceremony, no scroll pinned to the Senate doors that said, "Dear plebs, democracy is cancelled. Please continue struggling as usual." Instead, there was Augustus, or as you first knew him, Octavian, the pale, quiet grandnephew of Julius Caesar, the kid with the nervous energy and the suspiciously convenient victories. Then he got promoted, not by election, by survival, by outlasting every other powerful man in Rome until there were no rivals left, just a city too tired to argue. The Senate still exists, but only because Augustus lets it. It's like a ceremonial gong. Nice to look at, occasionally makes noise, but mostly just gathers dust and polite applause. They gave Augustus titles: princeps, first citizen, not king, never emperor. That would be rude. But he controls the armies, the grain, the treasury, the gods probably, and you? You control your sandals. Barely. At the street level, not much changes, which is in itself terrifying. The baker still sells burnt bread. The landlord still pretends not to hear complaints. The forum still smells like garlic and lies. But something in the air feels different, like the city is holding its breath. Statues of Augustus appear everywhere. He's always serene, always barefoot, always pointing at nothing. You joke once that he's pointing at the future. Your cousin replies, "He's pointing at our taxes." You both laugh softly. Because that joke isn't not treason. People talk. quietly. At least there's peace. Sure, peace. Paid for in executions. At least the streets are safe now. If you don't count the roving tax collectors and broken aqueducts, you keep your mouth shut. Rome is still Rome. A word can kill you faster than a sword, and yet things do seem calmer, in a way that feels unnatural. No more civil wars, no more generals marching on the city, no more senators stabbing each other in broad daylight, just in back rooms now. The army gets paid, the grain flows, the temples are rebuilt. Augustus claims he's restoring old values. You're still trying to restore your sandals. You get a handout one day. Grain, oil, a small coin. The tag says, from Augustus, father of the nation. You don't know if you're supposed to be grateful or suspicious, so you do both. You use the oil, you trade the grain, you keep the coin, not because it's valuable, but because it has his face on it. You want to remember who won. Your aunt remembers the Republic. Barely. She mutters about true Romans, about Cato, about virtus and libertas, and other words that don't buy lentils. You ask her what it was like. She squints. Louder, she says. Worse? Number just different. More shouting. Less marble. You nod. That sounds like Rome. You once saw Augustus in person, from a distance, in a litter surrounded by guards. He looked tired, or wise, or smug. It's hard to tell at that distance, and someone nearby whispered, "He saved us." Another muttered, "He replaced one dictator with himself." You just kept walking, because you still had to get to the olive vendor before the prices rose again. You're living through a page in history. You just don't know it. And it's not a clean page. It's smudged, crumpled, and stained with wine and blood. Years from now, historians will write about this era like it was a story. But you know better. It's not a story, it's a stew, thick, complicated, slightly burned, and somehow still feeding you. So you carry on. Not for glory, not for legacy, but because rent is due, the baker's impatient, and Tiberius claims the roof will leak again tonight. Maybe Augustus brought peace. Maybe he just put a lid on the chaos. Either way, the city hasn't collapsed yet, and in Rome, that's the highest compliment you can give to anyone, including yourself. You wake up hungry. Of course you do. You went to bed hungry. There's no pantry, no cupboard, no sealed jar labelled emergency dates. There's just the crust of bread someone dropped yesterday and a pot that smells vaguely of last week's lentils. You check your coin pouch. One is on a button that fell off your tunic. The button has sentimental value. The coin has caloric value. You know which one will win. Rome is a city of feasts, just not for you. You've seen the banquets. Not attended, of course. Seen. From a distance. Past the marble colonnade, through the open doors. Tables sagging under roasted birds. Olives, stuffed dormice. Yes, real. Fish covered in more sauce than dignity. The rich eat like gods. The poor eat like survivors. Your meals are more strategy than indulgence. Today's plan? Buy a crust of bread, maybe a handful of beans. Convince yourself the boiled cabbage has notes of garlic. You head to the market. Not the Forum. It's too expensive, too polished. You go to the side alleys, where the vendors look tired and the cheese looks confused. You find a baker you trust. He gives you a discount because you once saved his stall from a runaway mule. He gives you the good crust, the one that still has the possibility of softness inside. You chew slowly, because fast chewing leads to disappointment and jaw cramps. Back home you cook, if you can call it that. You set a small fire with twigs, hope, and a lot of blowing. The pot goes on. Water first, always water first. Then, whatever you have, today's recipe, water, 2 beans, 1 wilted leek, half a prayer, and a borrowed pinch of salt. You call it legume stew. Your cousin calls it sad broth. Your aunt calls it acceptable. She eats 3 bowls. You dream of meat. Everyone does. Once a month, maybe, you buy a scrap. Not a cut. A scrap. The kind of thing butchers sweep off the table when someone rich finishes shopping. You fry it, overcook it, worship it. You chew it like it's gold wrapped in fat. Once, You tasted a roasted fig wrapped in bacon at a festival. You still talk about it like it was a religious experience. The truth is, Rome feeds its poor. Just enough. There are grain distributions. You line up, receive your sack, and thank Augustus because it's stamped on the bag. You grind it, bake it, or trade it for wine and regret. You stretch lentils like an artist. You make porridge sing with a hint of honey, if someone left some unattended. You learn that garum, fermented fish sauce, goes with everything if you stop smelling it first. Meals are communal, not because of sentiment, but because of scarcity. 1 pot, 3 people. You eat together or not at all. Tiberius always claims he's full, then stares longingly at the spoon. Your aunt cuts her bread into perfect thirds, even though no one asked her to. Once a week, someone brings home a treat, a bruised apple, a honey cake someone dropped, a bruised honey cake apple. It becomes a festival. For 5 minutes, you remember what joy tastes like. Then it's gone, and you're full of warm water and maybe 7 lentils, but it's enough, not for thriving, but for tomorrow. And tomorrow's the only thing worth seasoning. You don't eat well, but you eat. Which makes you luckier than half the empire, because there are droughts, and poor harvests, and grain shipments lost at sea, because you've seen people claw at bakery doors during shortages, because hunger in Rome is quiet until it isn't. It creeps, it scratches, then it riots. But not today. Today there are beans, sort of, and so you sleep, not satisfied, but full enough not to dream about food. Tomorrow may be meat, tomorrow may be olives, tomorrow may be just another crust, but today your stomach doesn't argue. That's the best kind of peace. You've lived another day, which in Rome is victory, not the kind with trumpets or marble arches, not the kind that gets recorded by historians with suspicious agendas, just a quiet, stubborn kind of victory, the kind you wake up with and go to bed still holding, like a crust of bread you save for the morning. Because in this city, this boiling, beautiful, infuriating pile of gods, bricks and contradictions, survival is resistance. You don't write laws, you carry them. You don't wear a toga, you wash the one someone else does. You're not remembered. You're not carved into marble. You're not part of the speeches. You're part of the silence that made the speeches possible. You built the roads, carried the bricks, hauled the wine, the water, the children. You made the city function while poets wrote about emperors and generals who tripped on their own egos. And yet, you are Roman. Absolutely. Not because of wealth, or birth, or lineage so long it needs its own census scroll. You are Roman because you wake to the sound of 1,000 footsteps and still walk anyway. You are Roman because you know that the forum is for the powerful, but the market is where the city breathes. You are Roman because you feed your family with beans, not glory, and love them with a loyalty emperors couldn't afford. You are Roman because Rome is not a government. It is a condition. It seeps into you. The dust, the heat, the sound of sandals on stone, the smell of garum that refuses to die, the rituals, the gossip, the 1,000 tiny negotiations that make up a life. You do not conquer Gaul. You conquer the stairs to your Insula every single day with a back full of aches and a heart full of worry. And maybe, just maybe, that matters. Maybe 2,000 years from now someone will ask, what was it like to live in Rome when Augustus took power? And the scrolls will speak of reforms, armies, provinces, politics. But you'll be here too, in between the lines, in the margins, a child of the Subura, a carrier of water, a mother of 3, a seller of bread, a person who existed fully, even without a statue. You are the Rome they don't carve in stone, but the Rome they built everything on. You, who never had a title, but always had a task. You, who survived not by conquering others, but by enduring each day with grit and grease. You, who walked the streets while emperors walked on marble, and still found time to smile at a neighbour. Rome remembers its monuments, but you are its foundation, and even if no one records your name, history happened with you in it. So you light your lamp, you eat your crust, you bless your children, you make a joke about the smell in the stairwell, and you go to sleep one last time in this story, as a citizen of the greatest contradiction the world ever built, a city where nothing lasted, and yet everything endured.